everyone. Welcome to ARG Airlines. I'll be your captain this evening, Amigo Aaron, joined by a fellow who came straight from the airport lounge. I give you co-pilot, the Brent.
Co-pilot? You gotta
Listen,
be kidding me.
I'm
flying this
I was
sucker.
over under and he was underdone.
Straight into the ground.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So, if you joined us last week, we spun the wheel. We made the exciting deal, Brent. I've never been more excited for a show in my life. When we spun this, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know this category existed, but it does. It's BAM. C64 flight simulators, the Brent. C64
Yes.
flight simulators. Now, I'm not going to lie. I seen this on the wheel, and when I saw it on there, I begged that it would never come up because flight simulators are not my bag. And flight simulators on the C64, I find it seemed like it was going to be a bad draw. What were your initial thoughts on this particular subject?
My first thought was C64 flight sims. What are there, like 1, 2?
Incorrect.
Wow, I was very
Yes,
wrong.
there are tons of these things. I was stunned. I've made a huge list here. We'll get to here in a little bit. But before we get too deep into the whole flight simulator thing, we're going to talk about what defines a flight simulator. What experience do you have in flight, Brent? How many flights have you taken in your life, and what were your experiences on said flights?
Oh, I've been up in the old Wild Blue Yonder 4 or 5 times. A couple short flights coming from West Virginia to Massachusetts. I made that flight a few times when I had a girlfriend that was living out there. And, of course, our epic cross-country flight to Vegas. But I've never been cross-ocean.
No.
Which, at some point, I would like to do. But
that would be something, wouldn't it? Neither have I, by the way, of course. You know, I've had some scary moments in the air. When I worked for IBM, this was a lovely week of anguish. Because they told me, they're like, hey, we're going to send you to our plant in Mexico, Aaron. And I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, you get to train all your replacements because you're all laid off. I was like, oh, that's not good. And so they flew me down. And the flight down, you know, we had to stop over in Houston before we went down to McAllen, Texas, I believe is where it was. And as the pilot, you know, we're in a full-size aircraft. And as this sucker's careening towards the airport, all of a sudden, the plane goes whoop and shoots up. I mean, with like G-forces, you know what I mean? Like, and I was like, what?
Sure,
what the heck was that? Because we were landing. And the pilot goes, nothing to worry about there, folks. There was another plane on the pad. Just as nonchalant as he said. I was like, oh God, that doesn't sound good. And then we spun, we circled Houston for about 20 minutes or so, and he finally put that bird down. So that wasn't good. And on the way back, they had a stopover in Louisville, or in St. Louis, and so they were going to fly us from St. Louis to Louisville in like a prop plane or something. It was this real small.
Yeah.
No good. I felt like the big bopper up there. I was like, this ain't good, brother. I didn't like that thing was bumpy. You know, my buddy that was with us was all doped up, so he didn't care. But man, it was not fun for me. So, I'm not the best traveler when it comes to airplanes. In fact, I said I'd never do it again. And of course, this was all before the real bad airline entry happened with all the security and stuff. People don't believe me, Brent, when I tell them that when we went to Vegas, which was after 9/11, like the security was fairly light at that point, wasn't it? We kind of got right on the plane.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. We were making a Christmas Eve flight, and they were just waving us on like it was nothing.
Yeah, they even let us have liquids on the plane. We got to keep our shoes on, and the only one of the three of us that got really hassled by security was my buddy Rich, who was in full bondage gear, and so he was skin bald and huge.
Well, you should explain that a little bit. He's wearing a leather trencher.
He wore bondage pants, a leather trench coat. He was bald, and he was big bruiser of a guy, and had a bunch of earrings and stuff. And inevitably, he got pulled over by security.
Every single stop. It was amazing.
He must have fit the. I don't know what a bomber would look like, but it seems like he would be a little more discreet in your outfits. So that was
something to mention, Aaron. Just talking about our flight experiences, flying into Chuck Yeager Airport in beautiful Charleston, West Virginia, is a scary, scary thing because the airport, they just chopped off the top of a mountain and decided to put some airfield. If you miss the runway or you overshoot the runway at Yeager, there is no second
hit the
chance.
town.
It's just off a mountain.
I've never flown in or out of Yeager myself.
No,
I never have, but I've heard the stories.
Oh man, it's an experience because it's like, okay, I'm flying. I'm going to hit a mountain. Oh wait, I've landed.
You know, speaking of Chuck Yeager, he's a guy that has a game on the C64.
You know, in hindsight, we should have probably played that.
It did occur to me as I was putting this list together. But yeah, Chuck Yeager, he had a big time flight simulator back then. Chuck Yeager's advanced flight trainer. You know, I looked over. There's a pretty good sized list. I mean, there's probably 30 or 35 games on here that you could consider a flight simulator. But some of that is a loose consideration. Like, where do you draw the line on what you would consider a flight simulator? Like, for me, a game I could call a game like Chuck Yeager. That's definitely a flight simulator. But you could also sort of call a game like, I don't know, Blue Max a flight simulator. You take off, you land. You know, you have the altitude changes. Where do you draw the line? Would you let that one slide, or that would be called out?
I am a stickler when it comes to simulations.
Oh, okay.
You have to have more controls than just up, down, thrust, brake, left, right, gun. There has to be something more to the game to make it a simulator, because otherwise it's an arcade simulator, and those are fine. Nothing wrong with those, but those are not a simulator.
Well, now, there are exceptions. We'll get to that.
No. But, okay, here's where you need to know. Here's how to draw the line,
All right.
Aaron. Is Top Gun on the NES a flight
Yes,
simulator?
absolutely.
Absolutely not.
It is. It's, in fact, by the way, it's on C64 as well.
Landing and taking off does not a simulator make.
I'm going to disagree with you there. Yes, Rescue of Fractilis, the Curses, I would consider that a flight simulator as well. I want to go.
Aaron considers Time Pilot as
It's funny
flight
you should
simulator.
mention that. I'm going to go over some of the. I'm going to go over some of these, just a few of these highlighted games I've got here on my list just to chat about. Because I know we both dipped our toe in the pool of flight simulators here. You've got a lot of crazy stuff on here, but I recognized a few of these. Brent, F-15 Strike Eagle was a big game back in the day. And didn't we play that on we played that and its sequel on the Super Nintendo, I believe, because we were skirting the law on that one too. I might add, on flight simulators. And what did you think about F-15? It was one of the bigger ones, I think, of all time, at least back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely good game. It has a lot of fun aspects to it. For me, the combat in F-15 was a little unforgiving.
Yeah.
And I think that's what bothered me the most about it. But yeah, good game. I'm not going to deny it's a good game.
Now, another couple that I played quite a bit were Super Huey and Gunship. You know, where do you stand on the helicopter flight sims? I will admit I like them. I like my helicopter games a little more Super Cobra and a little less Super Huey. But what do you think of those?
My favorite helicopter simulator, and the name absolutely fails me right now, is the arcade one that was set down and had the proper foot pedals to sway left and right. Oh man, it's gonna kill me. I'll look it up and maybe I'll try to throw a comment in under the show on YouTube. But holy cow, such a great game.
Remind me, remember that arcade game where you flew the passenger jet? I think Sega had it out there.
Absolutely. One of my favorite arcade my favorite arcade flight simulator. It had all you flip the switches, you had to do the prep, the takeoff. Oh, I loved it.
You had a lot of I felt like you had a lot more pressure on you because you had a passenger jet up there. It does add to the suspense a little bit when you're out there tooling around in it. And of course, Sega, this is the era of big games in the arcade that you can't emulate at home. So you had the triple screens and the whole 9 yards. I always thought that was a pretty fun game.
Steel Talon.
Steel Talon.
Steel
Yeah.
Talons. That's the helicopter flight sim without equal. Holy cow, it was so good.
I remember that one. Now, here's a tricky one for you, the Brent. Would you consider the arcade game Cobra Command, a flight simulator, the Laserdisc game?
No.
Why?
That's barely a game.
Sorry, trick question. Trick question.
My
so,
goodness.
I mentioned we had 35, 40 of these. We had a plethora of games to pick from. I'm going to lead the dance this week, Brent, because I think
you absolutely
because
are.
Here's the thing. I was
your game.
Hold on, hey ho! Yeah, of course it is. Are you a madman? I wanted to ensure that the game I chose this week would qualify as a flight simulator. So I picked a game that had flight simulator directly in the title, so there could be no discussion on the subject. And the game I went with, the Brent, was BAM! Arcade Flight Simulator for the C64. Now, Arcade Flight Simulator was released by Amazing Games, because it's gold if they release it, and it was released in 1989. And also had releases on the Amstrad and the ZX Spectrum, by the way. And I actually played one of those. It was designed by a fellow named Dennis Webb, who also did the graphics in Outrun. He did a lot of conversion work on Outrun. And it was co-designed and worked on by a fellow named Martin Webb, who was responsible for Karate Chop. Another one I like, Max Torque. That's a great name.
Max Torque.
He also worked on Outrun, Beneath the Stars, and the C64 conversion of Chucky Egg. So there you go. And the music, such as it is, the opening screen music was done by the legendary David Whitaker. We all love him. And I had to write this down because it amused me. The artwork on the tape case was done by the legendary captain of the Love Boat, Gavin MacLeod. It's the guy's name. Yeah, I doubt it's the same guy, but
yeah,
wouldn't that be nice? So, Arcade Flight Simulator seems contradictory, doesn't it? Well, it's not. You can have an arcade flight simulator, and this embodies everything that is flight simulators in the arcade. So, this game pitch you as a pilot. If you ever asked yourself, what would happen if, like, Blue Max and Time Pilot had a child, right? That unholy alliance, or what would you get? Well, you would get
not a flight
arcade flight simulator. Listen, it's in the name. So, in Arcade Flight Simulator, and this is directly from the hype bubble on the tape, you'll find yourself pitted against the cream of the airborne opposition through three different combat scenarios. You've got a World War II scenario where you fight with biplanes in 1918, or that's a World War I. Then you got World War II fighting over Pearl Harbor in the 40s, and then this is the creepy one here, Brent. This is the one that creeps me out. You've got a World War III scenario that takes place in the 90s and with fast jets over East Africa. Creepy. How did they know? Except that, thankfully, that didn't happen. This also has 1 to 2 player support, which we'll get to that in a minute. So, what do you do in Arcade Flight Simulator? Well, the first thing you've got to do is take off. Now, like any good flight simulator, takeoff and landing is vital, and this game is no different. So, you start on a runway, and you're overhead. You can see enemies. You take off from your runway, and you are instantly confronted with the enemies. Of course, you have to hold down on the joystick to get your kite in the air. On the screen, you're going to see a fuel gauge, an ammo gauge, your score, and how many planes you've got left. And the most important thing there, that's not the fuel gauge, is an altitude meter. It's just it looks like a Mario. It looks like a Dr. Mario pill with a plane stuck in it. And it tells you what altitude you're at. Now, this is what separates this game from a game like Time Pilot or some lamer game. This is the simulator part, because it simulates altitude. And as you fly over across the landscape, different things are at different altitudes. So sometimes you can go down pretty low, and you're going to be okay. And sometimes you're going to hit a building or a tree. So you've got to be very careful as you maneuver your kite through these various scenes. This game features a wraparound screen. So there's a little bit of the original Atari 2600 combat stuck in here. And this is vital to the strategy involved in this game because you actually fly off one side of the screen, come back on the other. You're always swinging around to try to get a better angle on your opponent. And your opponent can also do the same thing. And I've noticed that the opponent in this is not stupid. He will follow you around quite nicely to hone in on you with his bullets. I mentioned you've got a limited number of ammo and you've got a limited number of fuel. This is the crux of the game. All right? And so in this game, you'll notice that you'll lose fuel. I will say they got the World War I plane correct because it can only stay in the air for about a minute before you run out of gas. And so...
Yeah, a minute I wish.
So what you've got to do is you'll see scattered across the map. I should mention that the map scrolls horizontally. So you'll go off the map vertically, but horizontally the map scrolls. It's a pretty decent sized map. And you can scroll around. Down on the ground, you'll see buildings that have a fuel, pulsating fuel sign on them. Now, the way they used to do it back in the old days, the Brent, there was no refueling like in your game. You just had to glide down close to the ground. I can only assume you stick your arm out of the plane and grab an oil can or something, a gas tank, and fill her up in the air. Because what you've got to do is lower your altitude down to where you're at the level you can get the fuel. You can't just fly over the fuel at any level. It won't work. You've got to be very, very low. And, of course, that you get inherent problems, such as the fuel is always near buildings and stuff. So you have to avoid the buildings. But also, you can just go down too low and hit the ground. So you've got to be careful. Getting fuel in this, not easy. In fact, that's probably the hardest part of the game, is getting fuel. The other expendable resource you have is your ammunition. The only way you can get ammunition in the game is to go to a runway and land your plane. You'll land your plane, get ammoed, and then go back up in the air, which is also not easy. You got to remember, the entire time these things are happening, you've got the enemy, and the enemy is very hot on your tail. Like, they never take a break when it comes to pursuit. To get off the first level and the second level, you have to kill a certain number of planes. I believe it's 10 on the first level. 10, and then I believe it grows as you get to the third level. I can tell you that I was only able to get to the second level in this game. I never got to the third level.
Yeah, same.
And I will also say that there is no footage that I can find on the internet of anyone getting past the first level of this game. Now, people mentioned that they had, but I could only get to the second level. Now, I think with some luck and some skill and continue to play, I might be able to get to the third level, but I've read that once you get to the third level, it loops. Each level puts you in a different aircraft, and it puts you in a different scenario. On the second level, you're like at sea, like coming off an aircraft carrier, which is cool. In the third level, you are in like a stealth fighter, and I only know this from having a look at the Spectrum version and see what the heck was going on, because there's no 64 version that shows you getting that far. So that it's a difficult game, the Brent. What were your thoughts on this game? Of course, we're talking about the single player mode right now. What were your thoughts on this? The boot up, the little song it plays, the graphics, and the overall gameplay.
As a game, this was pretty fun. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, you are not going to be spending hours and hours with this thing. This is a get in. It takes probably 10, 15 minutes to figure out what the game wants you to do, as in how to do the things that are presented before you. But after that, you can have probably, I don't know, an hour or so of fun. It's fun to try to progress to the next level. Something Aaron didn't mention, after you shoot down the 10 enemies, your mission's not over. You've got to pick up a bomb and then go and bomb a location. And if you miss, you actually have to shoot down 10 more things.
How many times did you have that happen?
Oh,
I only hit
I only
once.
Destroyed the depot once.
And it was not the first time either. It was like the fifth time on a different game. Because once you miss that bomb, you might as well just quit, because you're pretty much starting over. Brutal.
Yeah. The way this game gets its difficulty is the planes are at various heights, and you can't shoot them unless you are lined up with them and this is kind of troublesome.
Yeah.
Because I never looked at the altitude gauge, not even
Oh,
once.
well, yeah.
The plane has 6 or 7 different drawings that shows it at different altitudes, and you have to match the size of your plane versus the size of the plane you're trying to shoot down. And if they're both the same size, then you know you're on the same altitude and can shoot them down, and vice versa. That I thought that was kind of neat, and the game is very, very smooth.
Yeah.
NES level of smoothness. Of course, when you turn the plane, it doesn't turn, smoothly. It's an 8-direction turning, which is fine for a game like this.
Yeah, because they wouldn't turn on the dime anyway.
Well,
and we know this was trying to simulate these various aircraft, like a flight simulation away.
No, it wasn't trying to simulate anything. It was trying to give you an arcade fun, which is exactly what it did. And that doesn't make it a bad game. It doesn't make it a flight sim, for goodness sakes. But it's a fun game. It does get frustrating because you will have times when the enemy will shoot you while you're still taking off. Every time that you lose a life and you restart, the enemies aren't in their starting positions. They're basically wherever they were when you died. So if you were fighting right next to your runway, when you come back, the enemies are going to be in that same vicinity, and they will just dive down and shoot you before you even have a chance to take off. That kind of sucks.
And that happens.
The other problem that you'll have is you can have 3 or 4 enemies on the screen at the same time. And when that happens, it's very, very difficult to maneuver and line up your shots, because every way you go, there's an enemy shooting at you. The last problem I have with the game, gameplay wise, is the bullets from the enemies are too small to see. You just have to expect that if they are lined up with you, pointing at you at the same altitude, you're going to die. There's no really dodging the bullets. They are there as just little specks, but actually using that to try to dodge the bullets, I maybe did it 1 or 2 times, but it was not something you could rely on. The fun aspects of the game, though, making you refuel as often as you do, adds to the fun, really. I liked going down and getting the fuel and coming back up.
I thought it went too fast, though. I'll be honest with you. I thought
it may be a little bit.
I was desperately trying to find a trainer for this so I could turn the fuel gauge off, and I couldn't find one.
I did have a
You're
trainer.
kidding me. I looked everywhere for one.
Yeah, I had one that would give you infinite lives and infinite fuel and infinite ammo.
No wonder you did so well.
And no, I did not use the trainer.
That's what they all say.
I didn't use the trainer until afterwards. But it was one of those games where, also, if you use a trainer, there is no fun in the game. Seriously. I mean, some trainers you can kind of tweak the game to make it more enjoyable. Anything you change in this kills the actual flow of the game. So, overall, a fun game, but it is absolutely not a flight simulator.
It's called Arcade Flight Simulator. I'm standing by that.
No. Are you saying Goat Simulator simulates you being a goat?
I've played that.
Yeah.
A couple of things I want to mention. Number one, this game was a budget title. Okay, so we should mention that, which I found out after the fact. I found out a lot of stuff about this game after picking it, but it was a budget title. I think for a budget title, it's pretty fun.
Absolutely.
I think the fueling is very difficult, and I wish they'd put the fuel somewhere you could get to it easier, at least for the first couple levels.
Oh, I don't think you think actually getting the fuel.
It can be. Well, I mean, when you got a lot of guys on you, it can be, or when you're running low.
Yeah, I had no problem.
And then landing, not easy. But this was a fun game. Now let's talk about the 2-player element, where you play against your buddy. Now in the 2-player version of this, it blows the screen up to like a wide screen. Okay, so like the screen doesn't scroll in the 2-player. And effectively, the 2-player game is just basically like a dog fight. I mean, you just drive around and shoot each other, and then when you die, you have to take off. One thing I noticed is you could actually you could actually park your plane in front of your opponent's runway and just continuously shoot it like 3 or 4 times. If you're, so I could see where you'd want to throttle a sucker when that happened. I read, I can't confirm this, that this was on a that this at some point was released on a cassette with a game called Thunderbolt on the other side, which I don't know what Thunderbolt is. But if you're, so I guess you get 2 for 1, not too bad. I want to talk a little bit before we move on about one of the authors of this, a guy named Martin Webb. I mentioned Martin Webb did Karate Chop, Max Torque, Outrun. All right, so I found as I was doing research on this, a little blurb about Martin Webb, and I want to read this, and I want you to keep in mind that I found this on Moby, but I'm pretty sure this is legit. But I think this is one thing I like with this game is the backstory about this guy, because the bio is very in depth. All right, so I'm going to read this. Martin started making computer games at the age of 13 from his bedroom at his parents' house in rural Kent. As a young child, he struggled at school with reading, writing, and spelling, failing the once then 11 plus exam and being tested for speech impediments. He was strangely selected as one of 15 boys at his school in Tetterden, Kent, to enroll in the CSE computer course. So here's a kid he had all kinds of learning problems. It says this was the changing point in Martin's life. At first, he was slow to catch on the concepts of computers, but the blinking cursor and possibility of what it meant captivated the 12-year-old. His hidden entrepreneurship had him washing cars and cutting grass out of school hours to fund the purchase of his first PC, a ZX81, costing 49 pounds. ZX81, the first computer I figure a lot of people had back in the day. As soon as the box was open, he was struck at the keyboard. While other boys at his age were typing in games and playing them, Martin had bigger sights. He quickly mastered the skills of programming and spent his afternoons at school at a local bookstop reading books on how to code and construct games. All right, so he says his disabilities seemed to be gone at this point, and he had a passion. By age 15, his computer skills and fame had grown so much that his headmaster asked him to set a level A exam, even though he'd not set the 2-year course. So he was basically clipping out, brother. He used one of the games as a project work and scored an A+, making him the first student in Kent to set and pass the A-level computer studies course. Martin, now a seasoned game programmer, was 16 and out of school, working full-time on publishing games with his father at their house in Kent. They released hordes of computer hits. In 1987, a meeting in Birmingham saw him win the contract to code Outrun for the Commodore 64. Martin recalls being taken into a room and showing the huge arcade machine. Jeff Brown, the then director of U.S. Gold, asked the 17-year-old, "Can you convert this onto a home computer?" 9 months later, Outrun went on to be the biggest selling game of its time. Martin recalls, "I was in Spain on holiday with my girlfriend when I heard that Outrun was #1 in Boots and Smith, and I was so proud. In January, we got our first royalty check for Christmas sales, a staggering 17,000 pounds. Yeah, woo. So, and it goes on to say that he moved on to live in South Africa. And this bio, the reason I like it the best is it was contributed by Martin Webb. So he wrote his own bio. That's the way you do it, Brent. And but I like that because you sort of get an insight to how these bedroom programmers operated. And here's a kid who was, and you know, I know a lot of people like this. They were sort of having a rough time in school, and computers brought them forward, gave them something to do, and something they excelled at. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing I want to talk about here. We mentioned that this thing was released on the ZX Spectrum. I took a look at the ZX Spectrum version of this. You know, it's funny, the Brent. The Spectrum has this bad habit of being awesome. And for whatever reason, they've done it again. I like the Spectrum version of this. I thought it was pretty good. It's, you know, the Spectrum has it's a limited machine and when it comes to its capabilities, but the people that worked on this, they really had a knack. Now, the ZX Spectrum version scrolls in the opposite direction, but it's good. I think it's very similar in a lot of ways, a lot of fun. So you can check that one out, and it looks pretty good too. Of course, hope
You know what I noticed, Aaron? The Specky version has shadows.
You know, someone mentioned in the chat that this had mentioned Zaxxon, and when you're having the dogfights, it did remind me a lot of Zaxxon, and not in a good way. Zaxxon is another game notoriously difficult for its dogfighting in space because of the different levels, and that altitude change thing just simply doesn't translate real well. And so even with the meter and everything else, it's that makes it difficult. So there you go. I should mention I looked up some reviews on this, the BRENT. So Lemon 64 gives us a 6.4. Ace gave it a 3 out of 5. C and VG gave it a 49%. That's a burial.
That's ridiculous.
Commodore Force gave it this is a budget title too. Commodore Force gave it a 78. Commodore User gave it a 63, and Zap, another burial, gave this a 41. And I will say, I also read that Zap also crapped on the opening theme, which I thought was pretty good. We got a review from Pajako for Arcade Flight Simulator. He writes, "This game could have been awesome. However, it is overly complex. Not only do you have to contend with enemies who cast no shadow, so gauging their height is tough, but on top of that, having to refuel a lot and top up ammo, which I couldn't figure out, makes this game annoying. But for a budget game, not totally terrible." 6 out of 10, Brent. 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I think this was a fine game. It was a fun game. This was
a.
If all budget titles were this good, they wouldn't be called budget titles.
And also, I would say it's a top shelf flight simulator. eBay.
It has no simulator of flight whatsoever. It's an arcade game that is fun because it has some planes.
You can't deny the fact that I did not violate the spirit of the show. I used
what's really ridiculous for those who aren't in the know behind the scene. Aaron outright vetoed my first pick for not being a flight simulator.
It was a war. It was a text-based war game.
And then he presents to us a not flight simulator.
That's an
so
opinion.
The next time I pick Battle Chess, I just want everyone to remember this day right now.
It's in the title. eBay, you could get these in the UK for under £10 or $10 all day long. They're giving them away. So yeah, it was great. I agree. This is a flight simulator. Now, with all that said, Brent, you had a choice this week, a special choice.
Yeah, I picked the flight simulator.
Now, are you going to talk about the game you picked first? Do you remember the name of it?
It was what, B-1 Bomber?
It was like nuclear something. And once I looked at it, it was a text-based war game from Avalon Hill. And I thought to myself, clearly Brent hasn't done a lot of research on this because
no.
So there you go.
I fully admit I had not done a lot of research on it.
Why did you say no then?
I thought, you know what never gets played? Text-based flight simulators.
That's true.
B1. Yeah. So I thought, I asked our incredible Discord, I said, Discord, can you find me a text-based flight simulator? And bam, they did it. And then Aaron whined like a small child until he got his way.
Well,
so yeah. I was forced to change my pick, and I went with ACE, Air Combat Emulator, for the C64.
What a name!
Released 4 years before your game, Aaron. 1985.
This is an early one, yeah.
By a little outfit called Cascade Games Limited. Aaron, do you know what Cascade Games Limited was most famous for?
I don't.
They were famous for their 50-in-1 cassette tapes that they would sell on tons of different platforms. Commodore, the ZX Spectrum, the Apple II, there was more. But they would jammed 50 little admittedly to themselves, crappy games onto tape.
That's what I was.
Because
I was just thinking, how good could they be?
Oh no, they said what always irritated them was you would put a game on a cassette, right, and you would only use like 2 or 3 minutes of a 45-minute tape, and they were like, you know what? And the tape costs the same amount no matter what. Screw that. We're gonna pack a cassette full of games, full of them, and they did it. And they, at first, they were a marketing failure. No one wanted these cassettes. But what happened was they did this tremendous marketing campaign, spent thousands of pounds for this little itty bitty company, 3-person company at the time, or 2-person company at the time, and they flooded magazines with advertisements for this incredible 50-in-1 tape, and they absolutely sold thousands and thousands of them. It actually lifted the company off the ground.
I love
it. Ian Martin and Nigel Stevens, for ACE Air Combat Emulator, they also picked up Guy Wilmley. Actually, I believe Ian Martin was the odd man out, because Niall and Guy, I believe, is who started the company. So it was from those humble beginnings,
crooked beginnings,
which they fully admit the games were crap, and people who bought them,
I would buy them. I mean, because you figure out a 50, there's got to be some winners on there, you know.
No. They were hiring college or high school kids and giving them this tape, and was like, listen, all these games need to go on, like, I don't know, the Apple II. And the kids would be like, okay. And they would translate them over into Apple II. Yeah, they sold them for a long time. Long time. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about ACE. ACE is a military combat simulator, an actual simulator with actual simulating aspects. You start the game and you're given your choice of plane loadouts. You know, you can go heavy airstrike, you can go heavy ground target, you can go heavy sea targets, or you can kind of do a mixture, a play out. And they then put you on the runway, and that's it. You just go. And of course, the plot on it's kind of stupid. It's one of those, you're the last hope, if you're the only pilot that can save us all kind of affair. Which, that's kind of stupid, but there you go. After you pick your loadout, you're put on the runway, and you have to accelerate. You have to add your thrust, and you start rolling up to speed, and then you pull off the runway. And Aaron, what is the very first thing that happened when you pulled off the runway?
I blew up because I forgot I didn't know you had to pull up your landing gear instantly. Trust me, this is another one. Get the manual, brother, because you got to know. You got to know these things. You got to know all the shortcuts.
Absolutely. This game is borderline on complicated, but still simple enough to make it very approachable. So you pull off the runway, you put your landing gear up, and then the game proper begins. This is a very unique combat simulator that has you going after ground targets. You're basically defending your airfields, and you have 3 of them. The map on this is really fairly large, considering it's on a C64. And there's just enough detail to, there's just enough detail in the map that you kind of start picking up on things, where some things are located. And you have to go after the ground targets that are coming after your base. And when you engage the ground targets, tanks, anti-aircraft guns, that sort of thing, then they start sending you planes after you. And you have to do dogfighting and that kind of combat. All the while, your in-air thrust, your speed, you have to really maintain, because you will burn through fuel really fast if you just keep it thrust all the way up for the full time. Now, when you are in flight, right, and you're maneuvering up and down, left and right, if you bank this thing hard, 90 degrees, you absolutely turn the plane around. It is incredibly maneuverable, and it makes for exciting air-to-air combat. When you are off on your missions, you're going to run out of fuel. You're going to run out of ammunition. So what do you have to do? This game allows you to do mid-air fueling.
Yes.
And it's awesome.
This was the golden chalice of this game for me. To forget this, to do it. And I got it. By God, it took a couple tries. I ran into the plane 2 different times trying to get this done, because you have to match. I believe, this is how much I paid attention. The altitude had to be 2,100, and the velocity had to be like 21,000. And your velocity had to be like 200 or 210, and you had to nail it. Boy, what a cool look that was, eh?
Well, I'm assuming you played this with sound.
Yeah.
What did you think when it started giving you like warnings, like too close?
That was awesome.
Too close, in actual
yes,
voice.
I was.
Now it was a muddy.
Oh,
voice,
it was. But it's on a radio, so I mean, I would buy it. Listen, that was the highlight of the game, and the screen for refueling. I mean, the visual for it. It looked good. I mean, I was like, man, that's cool. Yeah. It's got the gimmick hanging off the back of the plane, and you had to kind of ease up into it with your big straw. It was awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and what makes it even, you can refuel that way, right? But you don't get your ship fixed or ammo refilled. To do that, you have to go and land at one of the 3 airports, and you don't have to land at your airport. The one you took off from. There's other airports that are
on the Allied side.
Restock your plane.
Yeah, you have to be on your side of the border.
The combat in this is really nice. If you are trying to use your gun, your cannon, your normal ammo, you've got to really line up and shoot and get a lot of hits on your target. And you can use the cannon to pretty much destroy anything in the game. However, if you have missiles, right, all you have to do is line up your crosshairs, hit the button, keep that target on the screen while your missile tracks, and you will blow it up. It was so refreshing that combat was still challenging. It was still fun, but it didn't get bogged down with all the details. Now, if you wanted an extra challenge, by all means, you can go after things with cannons, and it becomes a far more difficult task. But for just missiles and stuff, and I'm not saying it was easy, but it was fun. It was fun to do. Did you have much luck with
I was
combat,
blowing
Aaron?
stuff away left and right with my cannons without any trouble.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because, listen, I played a lot of wings, all right, and that translates quite nicely into this game. The way you shoot ahead and stuff. Yeah, I was deadly with the cannon. On my very first mission, I probably shot down 4 or 5 guys just with the cannons. I was killing it. Now, of course, I played it on Brain Dead Idiot mode.
Yeah, oh yeah, so did I.
Man, listen, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. When I saw you were picking this, I'm like, well, what do we got here? This game here is a winner, brother. Yeah. For a flight simulator on the C64, this is a winner. It controls well, like it looks good. I mean, it's sort of no frills in terms of the what you're seeing in front of you, but I mean, it plays well. The controls are fairly simple, but they're not. I mean, if you get the sheet that tells you what everything is, it uses a lot of buttons and stuff. But I mean, it's an airplane, brother.
It uses about 6 keyboard commands.
But I thought the enemy was cool. I'll tell you, there's a lot of variance in your targeting. It's got a great map. It doesn't have a map that you can look at, like it's not like a transparent map, but I mean, what are we, there's no way. The radar.
There is radar like on your console, but you do have to flip back and forth between map and in the ship. It
reminded me sort of when we played Knights of the Sky on the Amigos. It was the same kind of gimmick. And much like Knights of the Sky, you're not going to be able to use the ground for like visual markers because the ground is mostly just blank. You'll see some stuff.
There's hills and trees.
But, I mean, for the most part, there's nothing down there that's going to be a visible help to you getting around. So you've got to use that map. But the radar looks well. It sort of tells you when guys are coming up and coming down. It's not that difficult to gauge the altitude. Of course, you got the altimeter over there. It also tells you what position your plane's in as you're flying. And believe it or not, you can get turned around in this.
Yes.
But I mean, you're flying this thing. This is a precision aircraft. I mean, you're doing all kinds of crap now. In the more advanced levels, which I didn't try, there may be stalls and stuff. I didn't see any of that stuff in this.
No, not that I experienced.
But I'm telling you, and when the radio chatter came up, so I was like, man, I was impressed. I was real impressed.
Now I'm gonna blow your mind, Aaron. Did you know there was a 2-player mode?
I did know that, but I didn't try it.
The 2-player mode, you still have your pilot. He has to do all the things he does, takes off, flies the plane and everything else. But player 2 is your gunner, and he actually controls the reticle in the middle of the screen, and the pilot always has control of the cannon, but the co-pilot, the gunner, has control of the missiles. So he can track on the screen while the pilot is doing one thing, track on the screen of the enemy plane or the ground unit and fire the missiles independent of the pilot. What an absolute fantastic idea to do for 2-player. In the sequel, it lets you do split screen, but I didn't go into depth with that. But this was absolutely a beautiful addition for a second player.
I played some games on the Atari computer that had a similar premise. One guy plays like the gunner, but this is perfect for a game like this. And I can definitely see where it'd come in handy to have an extra guy. Plus, it's a neat way to get a second player involved. And basically is a 1-player game. It's a nice option to have. They really thought about it when these options, because you're picking the type of combat, the level of combat, 1 or 2 players for the combat. I like that stuff. It's not too advanced in terms of flight simulator. It didn't get crazy, but like I said, it's just enough to where someone like myself that doesn't like to get real deep into this stuff can do it. The map's easy to read. It's funny when you're trying to get to a certain spot and you are trying to save fuel. I mean, it could take a while to get there if you don't, So
if you don't thrust full blast.
I mean, you were talking about the map. It's pretty expansive. You've got all kinds of different ground targets. You've also got anti-aircraft coming at you. You've got enemy planes as well. You get a pretty good feeling like you're in a combat situation in an airplane. And again, it's more than I expected.
There's more. You also can fly nighttime missions and snow missions.
No kidding.
Yes. So you could at nighttime. Mostly these are all graphical changes, but it is nice to have a way to change up the game to keep it a little fresh. Flip it on night mode. Everything is mostly black. It's a lot harder to see things. And the snow missions, the landscape becomes white. Really, that's basically the only change. But it makes it... Oh, and the trees lose their leaves. So they do have that kind of little details.
Cute.
Some things, it makes it easier to target because they stick out more. Some things are harder to target. But the developers here, they went the extra mile and made a complete game. They could have cheaped out. They could have left out 2-player. They could have left out the multiple environments. They could have, not had you worry about landing gear. Maybe the landing gear pops out automatically whenever you get close to the ground, but they didn't. They went the extra mile, added this stuff in, and it made for a very compelling game that I personally would definitely recommend people check out. The general consensus for this game all over the map. And it's kind of funny. A lot of this game got reviewed multiple times. When it was released back in the 80s, 85, 86, reviews were off the charts good. Everyone was very complimenting the way it played, the way it felt, all that stuff. Wonderful. I don't know if it got a re-release or why people reviewed this later, but they also reviewed it in the mid 90s and early 90s. And for those reviews, they absolutely killed it.
That happens a lot.
I know a lot of progress happens over 5 years, but if you can't step back and be impressed at what this game did in 85, you really got to question if you are fair to video games.
Well, they probably re-released it as a budget title, you know.
It's possible. I couldn't find what they did. Also, this game, whenever you shoot something down, you get score based on what you shoot down and how you shoot it down. It saves, either if you buy it on a disc or if you buy it on a tape, it saves the top 5 scores. So it had everything. It had everything.
Yeah, it's a real keeper. You know, we got a review in Discord on this, the Brent. Our good buddy Pajako writes, for a C64, this is all right. It's a bit clunky and definitely one to play with a keyboard. However, it is hard to work out where you are, as the ground color never seems to change despite what the map shows. Good effort, but misses the mark for me. 7 out of 10. The Brent, but I think
it's 7.
I think maybe even a little higher on this one. I really was impressed. I don't know. Maybe I guess maybe I had my sights set low. Which, by the way, you can move your sights around in this, so you could literally set your sights low if you want to. But a lot of fun. I will say your game was was the winner of the week, but my game had a lot of good points as well. A lot of fun.
And my game was
so was mine. It was in the title. Speaking of in our title, this isn't the title, but we hold it dear. It's called The Wheel. Let's get it going here.
Oh, I think I hold it very dear.
So, Brent, this week...
Otherwise, it will punish us.
This week, we've added 2 new things here. So what we've got this week is our Retro Rewind piece. We've added the Jaguar. Everybody likes the Jaguar, Brent. And as our new piece this week, it's Game.com system, as was recommended by Rushi. Rushi's all over the place. He was just on, had his games read over on Retro Asylum. So it's another Rushi joint. So if you're in the chat, pay attention because there are plenty of pieces here. I should go over these real quick. We've got Fight. We've got the Jaguar. VCR games that aren't the Action Max. The Sinclair QL. Chat subject choice. The Combex 35. The new 16-bit games. Games that became other games. And the Game.com system. Brett, are you ready to go?
Yes, games that became other games.
Here we go. That's a good spin there. And the winner is, oh no, it finally happened, Brent. It's Chat Choice. It's Chat Choice, the Brent. So,
all right,
tell them what that means, Brent.
While our incredible chat takes a moment to choose something that they would like to see us, this is absolutely wide open. Whatever gets the most votes here within the next minute or so, we will start again, start anew.
Let's see it.
And we have female leads.
Female leads.
That's it.
Female leads. So, next week, we'll be doing games with female leads. Although the launch title one and the Australian one, we may put those in our back pocket. Brett, make a note. Put those on the list because everything gets chosen. We're absolutely desperate for anything. So we'll do it. So next week, Brett, games with a female lead. I like it, man. That sounds pretty good.
Absolutely.
So I think we've taken care of our business, Brent. Any last words before we take this thing to the house?
No, we will do better next week. We promise.
He won't. I'm always getting better. We'll see you next week, everybody. Adios.
Thanks for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. We want to say a special thank you to Duncan Styles for our vector style graphic and Bart Pitt for our amazing music. We also want to say a super special thank you to our supporters. Rolo, Olive Huff, Terry Howard, Gary Heather, John Schaller, The Slow Norris, Frodo and L, Chris Foles, Mitsuyama, Jason Warnes, Rob Flack O'Hara, Andy Craig, Andy Jones, Kevin Bean, Jacko 6502, Anthony Jarvis, Steve Rasmussen, Bernhardt Lucas, Dave Velociraptor, Graham W. Vetke, Roshi, Mr. B, David Terrence, Super Tech Boy, Oram, Sundown, Texas Foosballer, Airshack, Retro Algae, John Deckman, Jerry Dennington, and Z9K9. Would you like to become a supporter for as little as $1 a month? You can do so at patreon.com/ARGpresents. Supporters get access to our Discord channel and their name called out in the credits. Don't want to explain another credit card bill? That's okay too. You can support us by leaving us a positive review on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Have an idea for a wheel piece? Email us at argpresents@mail.com. We film live every Sunday on Twitch, Sunday, 10 a.m. Hope to see you there.